He used to be the team physician for the Lakers and the Dodgers. Now, Dr. Alexander is bringing that same precision to the rest of us with a 30-minute whole body MRI that's already saving lives. I have a scary question for you. What if the greatest threat to your long, healthy life isn't how you eat or how much you exercise, but a cancer or an aneurysm silently growing right now, and the medical system won't even look for it until it's too late? That's the reality for millions. My guest today isn't just a longevity expert. He's a physician who decided to take that problem head on. Dr. A. Alexander is a board-certified radiologist, the CEO of CoreViva, and the former team physician for the LA Dodgers and Lakers, meaning he's seen health at its absolute peak and its absolute depths. From proving at the NIH that caloric restriction extends lifespan in primates to building one of the most advanced MRI-first centers in the world, he's showing us how to catch disease before it catches us. Welcome, Dr. Alexander. In 1999, you were at the NIH proving that restricting calories could extend primate lifespan. And 25 years later, you founded CoreViva, and you're literally saving lives with a best-in-class MRI-first solution.
Yeah, so now just thinking back of it, you just remind me how old I am. It was just 26 years ago. That's a lot. Yeah, it was really interesting. So I was involved with a group at the National Institutes on Aging, looking at how caloric restriction increases longevity. And we found that in both in rat and in monkey model that it increased longevity. We looked at certain pathways that were activated through this model, and we realized that indeed caloric restriction does increase longevity. It also makes you think, should I eat as much as I do sometimes? And how do I do that?
And to this day, it's one of the only things we know for sure, it feels like, about longevity. Like all the other things that we're positing, like interventions and lifestyle practices, it's all very fluid and it seems like contradictory. But caloric restriction seems to be that steadfast truth that's lasted over all these decades.
Yeah, and actually what's interesting is then you can also study those blue zones, right? Where people have lived for over 100 years typically, and they have high longevity there. I'll come back to the caloric restriction piece, but what's interesting about the blue zones is that a couple of things. One, their diet is very clean. And I've noticed that, like, very, very clean diet. A lot of these places eat a lot of vegetables or are vegetarian. We have a blue zone here in Southern California in Loma Linda, and they live very long, and they're typically vegetarian. And so another thing I've noticed is community. And so a lot of these have a very strong community. And I think that personal interconnection is really important to have a meaningful life. And they're active, they walk, they talk to each other, they get together. And I think that community also probably helps increase the longevity. But going back to the caloric restriction, what's interesting is that kind of has evolved over the last 26 years to intermittent fasting. And the same group that I was with published on intermittent fasting a few years ago in the New England Journal of Medicine. And it showed that intermittent fasting can also increase longevity. But I think the thing that most folks get wrong with intermittent fasting is it's not that you eat that same amount of calories condensed in, say, from 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. The whole intermittent fasting concept is you're cutting out a meal. And I think that's what most people miss, that you're actually cutting out a meal. You are reducing your calories under the name of intermittent fasting, as opposed to, I'm just going to eat a bunch of food. My 2,000 calories are going to be condensed into 4 or 6 hours. It's actually cut out one of those meals. That's the whole point of intermittent fasting. And I think that's what a lot of people get wrong. I've had patients come to me and say, I can't lose this belly, but I'm intermittent fasting. Okay, well, what are you eating? Same amount of food condensed into 4 hours.
Right.
That's not going to change. So that's the key right there.
I've tried it myself, and now I'm much more of a relaxed intermittent faster, meaning I'll fast roughly 12 hours or so, but I'm not extremely strict about it. But I remember when I was trying to do more of like the 18-6 or 16-8 pattern, sometimes it's a competition. It's like, okay, I have to get in my last bite before I have to start fasting.
Right,
so.
and that kind of defeats the point, right? So, what we found, and unfortunately, one of my mentors, Dr. Robert Michael Anson, he passed away during the pandemic. And what was interesting is that we found that in a smaller model, in nematode model, cycling was having the same effect as caloric restriction. Cycling meaning some days you eat more, some days you eat less. And so for me, I work out pretty hard every other day, roughly. And so those days I'm very hungry and I eat a lot. And the days that I'm not working out, I'm not as hungry, so I won't eat as much. I may skip a meal. I may eat a lot less. I only eat when I'm hungry. And so I think if you kind of go in with that mindset, that could also probably activate the same pathways that we found.
I love that you brought this concept of cycling up because it's coming up more and more in a lot of different research. So just as like 2 quick notes is, around sleep, we're always obsessed with our trackers telling us like, oh, you got X amount of deep sleep, but really you should have more deep sleep if you've worked your body a lot. And I think many of us struggle with getting adequate deep sleep or or REM because we simply are dysfunctional during our daytimes. We're not really moving our bodies and we're just sitting. We're being quite sedentary.
That's a
But
great point.
another thing that I just read about was there was yet another study about step counts. And this study actually said that it's around 4,000 is like the point beyond which there's diminishing returns. The funny outcome of it too was that there wasn't exactly like a rule that is, it didn't matter that you hit that 4,000 every single day. It was more like, did you hit an average of about that amount over a period of time? So you could be rather sedentary, I guess, on some days and then walk a lot on some other days, and that seemed to have like a equivalent effect. So again, back to your thought of like, maybe it's not that every single day has to be perfect. It's your body is adjusting somehow.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of like shocking the system, right? So for example, if you work out, or for those that work out, if you haven't done a muscle group or if you haven't done an exercise in a long time, then you'll feel it sore the next day. It's kind of like you're shocking the system. If you keep doing the same routine, you're going to plateau. And I think it's probably along those lines. I think the body does better or kind of wakes up with shocking. And I think shocking the system by cycling, you're kind of a lot, or in the walking, like you said, I think that's what really helps our bodies kind of stay awake in a sense. So I have a 3-2-1 rule with sleep that most of us don't follow, unfortunately. Every time I followed my 3-2-1 rule, and I've always told patients about this, it really works well to get a restful night's sleep. So 3 hours before sleep, no eating. 2 hours before sleep, no fluid intake. 1 hour before sleep, no screen time. And as you know, screen time, even with these kind of, they do like the blue lights or whatever, it still activates your pineal gland. Your pineal gland, if it's activated, it's not going to secrete melatonin. It needs to be kind of in the dark or not have that stimulus for at least an hour to really activate nicely or to really secrete that melatonin. So if you follow the 3-2-1 rule and you kind of have a clear mind, I promise that you'll sleep well.
I admit to being both a poor sleeper and also, like many people, I struggle near the end of the day. Like when you're tired, you have so much less discipline. Like during the day, I could do whatever, like it's supposed to be healthy for me. But then right around that 3-hour mark before I sleep, and then everything becomes harder. I'm like, okay, I have to stop snacking on things. I have to stop watching whatever I am on Netflix. And it's a struggle. So I think this is where routines come into play, and it has definitely worked. But I love that you brought that up because I'm still convinced it's the first thing and the most foundational thing we can do for our health and longevity.
If some folks say, oh, I can do great on 6 hours sleep, 4 hours sleep. I will tell you, studies have shown this, that I'm going to round up to the highest number. The percentage of people rounded up that can function optimally. So you can function, but function optimally with less than 8 hours sleep, rounded up is 0. Nobody can function optimally with less than 8 hours sleep. It doesn't happen. So now plus or minus, right? Maybe 7.5, 8.5, but generally, if you want to function at your optimal performance, you need 8 hours of sleep. No question about it. Sure, we can function at 6, 7, still able to do things, but if you want to function optimally, you really need that restful sleep, that 8 hours of sleep.
I want to talk about your experience working as the team physician for the Lakers and the Dodgers, who are, by the way, having quite a moment in history. Yeah. And I'd love to hear about your experience because that's really at the peak of human performance.
Yeah, I kind of wish I was still there sometimes because they're doing so well. It's really interesting because my experience with those athletes solidifies my belief that small habits play a much bigger role in our health span and lifespan. Let's take the easiest example, LeBron James. I mean, he is performing at a phenomenal level at age 40. I think the paradigm has changed, the axis has changed, the mindset has changed, but 20, 30 years ago, you barely saw any 40-year-old basketball players. And now you're seeing a lot more. I mean, Vince Carter was in his 40s when he retired, but he was still playing at a high level. I think Dirk Nowitzki was either close to or at 40 when he retired, but he was still playing at a decent level. And LeBron is just, he's one of the best players in the NBA, but he's 40, right? And so I think it's really how we take better care of ourselves and how do we think about doing that. Unfortunately, a lot of people spend their 20s, 30s, and 40s kind of really being themselves and not really taking care of themselves and kind of in the rat race and going tough. But we should spend our 20s, 30s, 40s planning for our 70s, 80s, 90s and really doing those small habits where it's, good sleep, good nutrition. I mean, a lot of these athletes are very in tune with their nutrition, are very in tune with their workouts, are very in tune with their sleep health. And, they have a regimen that they follow to make sure that they are the healthiest because they have to perform at a very high level. I think we sometimes take that for granted of how much they're pushing their bodies night in, night out to perform at that high of a level. If you ever kind of play a pickup game with an NBA player, which I have, I mean, I thought I was pretty athletic, but it's embarrassing how awesome they are. But again, that's years of work and really putting in that strong regimen of health, wellness, diet, nutrition, activity, et cetera. And I think those small habits really pay off over time.
I'm curious, you mentioned that there's an emphasis on all these foundational pillars, which
Yeah.
I love emphasizing over and over again. Are there any interesting things or practices that you noticed regarding any one of those foundations?
Well, a lot of these teams have nutritionists, folks that make food for them, et cetera. And so they have a good team surrounding them. I mean, essentially, a team management wants to make sure that athletes are healthy. And so they'll bring in the resources. And some people have their own personal chefs or own personal nutritionists.
I feel like professional athletes are full-time health enthusiasts in a way. And I'm kind of jealous of that because that's what I want to be. I want to be like full-time thinking about everything about my health and having all the resources pumped into my lifestyle to like protect my health. So tell us then, after this experience, what was the transition and origin story to what became CoreViva?
A lot of them were asking about kind of, how do I get my whole body scanned? And there seemed to be more and more buzz about it. And so one of my good friends, Dr. Su, who at that time he was at UCSF, he kind of had his finger on the pulse of what's going on and kind of cutting edge technology. And so I asked him about whole body imaging, and he just told me, he said, there's not really anybody doing it the right way. Nothing that I'd be comfortable sending my family to. Seeing a lot of mistakes at UCSF in follow-ups. And he has a lot of interesting stories around misses or overdiagnoses on a lot of patients that he saw in follow-up. And he said it was always a struggle for him to explain to patients, well, your whole body scan was incorrect. This is really the diagnosis, or your whole body scan overcalled this or missed this. So he convinced me, okay, just, hold off on recommending it. But as time grew, there was more and more buzz around it, and there was more interest in it. One of my right-hand guys from McKinsey, good friend of mine too, one of my co-founders, I said, let's look at what this is all about. Let's do like a market research. So we did it for about 2 weeks. And as we dug in deeper and deeper, we realized there's more and more interest. At the end of our kind of little diligence project, he came back to me and said, look, if you're thinking about doing this, I want to join this with you and I want to do it. I said, okay, I wasn't thinking about, leaving and doing a different role and that kind of thing. But, after more and more thought and then I talked to Dr. Su about it, and he said, I'd be willing to join you guys. I think there's a great opportunity here. He said that, I'm willing to leave and do this. He's a physics whiz, so it's really good to have him on board. And let's build something that we are comfortable sending our families to, and our friends to, and our athletes and our patients. Over 2 years, we developed the technology, we developed the AI, we kind of put everything together, and here we are.
I love this story because, frankly, I've been seeing multiple variations of whole body, either MRIs or there's like the skin pictures. There's a lot of ways to get people engaged with their body, and I think they're all great for what it's worth. But I do hear stories, and I'm not going to obviously name names. I don't want to make anyone angry, but I have heard stories similar to you where it comes up that the radiologist who wrote the report was actually a veterinarian, or and then that's just like alarming, right? This is what's happening out there. And I guess since it's bucketed in the field of wellness, so to speak, it's not like someone who's doing like a read for somebody who has a diagnosis of cancer necessarily. It kind of flies under the radar, but we are supposed to be catching some very life-threatening illnesses, diagnoses that might happen. So let's get concrete. So somebody comes to CoreViva. Yeah. What actually happens?
So the CoreViva journey actually occurs before they come to CoreViva. So, once they sign up for a scan, we have a very comprehensive intake form. It's very easy to fill out. It's digital, but it's comprehensive because our tagline is know your body. But for you to know your body, we need to know you to help you know your body. In the real world, in the kind of like clinical world, or academic world, or private practice world, radiologists usually get a very small snippet of what's really wrong. We'll just say pain. And so now, okay, so it's an abdominal scan. It says pain. Okay, but pain where? We don't get any detailed information. So we're trying to get as much information as possible from the patient to help them understand their body and look for things, right? There might be certain patterns that we see that say, okay, they probably have a predisposition for XYZ. Let's look closer at that. It really helps us look at things, and it also helps our AI kind of look at things as well. And so the journey starts before the clinic. They fill out this comprehensive intake form, and it goes through their history, family history, et cetera. And then once they come to clinic, we really try to personalize the experience. And so I think that's what makes us unique, is that I always tell the whole staff, treat every patient like your mother. At first I said, treat every patient like your parents, but somebody said, I don't like my father. I said, fine, treat every patient like your mother. Everybody loves their mother. So treat everybody, I hope. And that's really kind of the ethos of what we do. And so when they come to clinic, they're taken into their own personal suite. They can change into clothes that we offer them, and then they go into the scanner. The scan is only about half an hour. We've cut it down to make it pretty short, but we're very proud to say that we are the fastest, most accurate, most comprehensive scan in the market, by far. We're very proud of that. And so We want to make them comfortable. They can watch things or listen to music while they're in the scanner. So really making a comfortable experience. And then once they're out, and this is very unique to us too, we give them immediate results. And so they meet with the radiologist in-house. A lot of times that's me or my colleague. And they'll meet with us and we'll talk to them about their scan. We'll go through it with them and tell them what's wrong or what's not wrong and tell them what they can work on. Frankly, everybody has something. And so, what's interesting is every patient we've scanned so far I think the youngest we've had so far is 20. The oldest we've had is 92. And everybody has had some kind of musculoskeletal issue. There's always something you can work on. And I think that's good for them to see because a lot of these people are asymptomatic. We talk about prehab over rehab. Let's get to things before they become an issue where you do need rehab. And then obviously this cancer screening and the, looking for aneurysms, looking for fatty liver disease, all the other issues and conditions, over 500 conditions you can look for, when you're looking inside the body. So we give them that detail and then they get the full report within 48 hours with all the details for all their organs and systems, but also they get a CoreViva score, which is also something very unique to us. CoreViva score includes, and it's AI driven, includes your brain age, your musculoskeletal age, your visceral fat score, your muscle bulk score. And so they kind of have a snapshot of how am I compared to my chronological age. It's fun if couples like to, kind of compare,
I do that all the time with my partner, and he's irritatingly genetically blessed is what I will say, because I am much more adamant about adhering to a healthy lifestyle. And I think he's just plain lucky, which is very annoying to me.
Yeah, something else. Everybody's different, right? And some people just have it easier than others. There's some people I see with they're super active and they barely have any joint disease, and there's some people that have their joints look really bad, but they are not that active. It's just some of it's genetics, absolutely. Some of it's genetics, and I think you have to kind of adjust yourself, and that's why it's important to know your body because it's not a one size fits all model. I think you have to really understand where you fit into the paradigm and how you can be the best you.
I love the know your body tagline because I feel that whole body MRIs are a bit misclassified or mismarketed as cancer screening because, and I'll let you describe this more, but we know as physicians that we have very specific cancer screening protocols for specific types of cancers that are, better for different organs, like a CT scan for the lungs or a specific MRI for the breast or a colonoscopy for the colon. And I'd love to hear more because I'm not a radiologist. And this is something I wonder about all the time. I did spend time as an oncologist for a brief period before I turned into a longevity physician. And I still think back and wonder, is there anything better? Theoretically, an MRI could pick up quite a lot, but you'd have to adjust protocols. You'd have to, have thinner slices. So for everyone out there who has no idea how an MRI even works, why is CoreViva using an MRI rather than, some other sort of imaging modality? And what are the types of innovations that you've built upon it, as much as you could share, that's not proprietary, of course, that make the imaging process a lot more precise and accurate?
First, to talk about screening, and I think the biggest issue, and this is the gap that we're filling in the current medical, ecosystem. The standard screenings: Pap smears for cervical cancer, mammography starting at age 40 for breast, and colonoscopy starting at age 45 for colon cancer. Gold standard. We don't replace that, and we still tell our patients to still continue to do those things. For example, mammography can catch those tiny microcalcifications, 1 to 2 millimeters, that could end up being DCIS. MRIs are not at the place yet where they can catch those tiny microcalcifications.
Even the breast specific ones.
So depending. So breast specific ones with contrast can then show some enhancement in that area that shows that there's probably something going on. But you still want to do a mammography to see exactly where those calcifications are, because you get a region, but then it will kind of help you pinpoint it. So I would never recommend folks to not do mammography. I think that's the best for breast.
Oh, that's a bummer because they're definitely painful. So
yeah, no, I don't know because I haven't had it, but I know because I've seen, and I agree. I think there's got to be better technology, and hopefully better technology does come out over time. I think we've made steps, right? So we went from the 2D mammography, now we have the 3D tomosynthesis, which is much better. Outside of those three screenings for healthy individuals, non-smokers, there's not really any good, because smokers, you can do the kind of lung cancer CT low dose screening, but there's not really any good screening for, say, ovarian cancer, pancreatic cancer, brain aneurysms, fatty liver disease, early fatty liver disease. There's no good screening for these things. Renal cell carcinoma, liver cancer. I can go on and on. We've been open for roughly, I think it's been a little bit less than 2 months or around 2 months. And we've already caught 10 early stage cancers, confirmed.
My goodness.
So 10 early stage cancers, unfortunately, 1 advanced stage cancer. And these cancers would not have been picked up until it's too late, until they're symptomatic. Because a lot of early stage cancers, you don't feel anything. And when you start feeling stuff, it's either metastasized or it's growing big enough. And then, it's just a different pathway. And obviously the lifespan of somebody with advanced stage cancer, or the percentage of people that live with advanced stage cancer, is much lower than if you catch it early. If you catch it early, you have a much higher chance of survival. And
Yeah.
that's our goal. Our goal is to help people live a longer, healthier life. And part of that is let's catch these cancers early. And so, like I said, we've already caught so many things early. I mean, we caught a bunch of fatty liver disease, 2 brain aneurysms, just one on Monday. Fatty liver disease, like I mentioned, a lot of musculoskeletal abnormalities. Even with reproductive health, we found things with, the endometrium or ovaries. We're looking at how many follicles there are. And there's a lot of things that we found that help women also, kind of plan accordingly or give them confidence. So there's a lot of interesting findings that we found, but again, it helps educate folks about their body. Again, know your body is the tagline.
I have so many follow-up questions. You mentioned you visit with the patient directly after the scan, which is amazing and not something I've heard of before anywhere. And I'm just curious, between that immediate visit and the follow-up later, what is the difference that you might expect to explain? I expect you might see some of the most obvious things immediately, but then need more time to kind of go through the more detailed or smaller findings.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I tell every patient that, right? We're going to look through this together, first view, go through things pretty quickly. I tell them, I say, usually it takes me a long time to go through these scans. And then we actually double read everything. So Dr. Sue also reads everything too. I think one of the biggest issues we saw in everyone else that was doing this kind of stuff is there's a lot of false positives. And we've been highly accurate. So that's why we're most accurate. Our false positive rate is 0. So everything we've called, we've been right about. But we want to make sure. And so it's basically 3 pairs of eyes. It's me, Dr. Sue, and then our AI. And as we bring on more radiologists, it's going to be the same thing. We're going to try to have multiple eyes on things to make sure that the patient gets the best accurate read they possibly can. There's typically been very few things we find later on that, as opposed to
you
what
didn't
we
already see.
Yeah, you already see. But we do see some subtle things, and we'll call them afterwards and tell them, hey, we also found this, because we want to make sure that they know the plan. We don't want to leave them in the dark with just a report and say good luck.
Right.
Our philosophy is once you're a CoreViva patient, you're always a CoreViva patient. So if we find something, we'll help you. I mean, we've helped people make appointments. We've helped people kind of get into the right places. If we found something concerning, we just want to help them through their journey.
You're like a front door to the rest of medical care, actually, which is kind of an interesting way to position, because I think it's almost one of the best ways of having a comprehensive front door.
Yeah.
Most other front doors don't get to, even if you fill out like a 20-minute medical intake, it's not quite the same as just taking a very detailed picture of what's going on.
Like I said, it goes back to our ethos of treat every patient like your mother. And if my mother got a scan and I'd want to tell her exactly what this all means. If she needed something, I want to make sure she gets it. There needs to be phone calls made to accelerate appointments. I would make those phone calls for her. So it's the same philosophy. Just, every patient that comes in the door, we're going to take care of you. And we're not going to let you go until your care is complete.
This comes up a lot as a question. So I wanted to just say out loud that it's not immediately apparently cheap price that you're charging. It's $2,699. But for what you provide, it seems well worth it in terms of value. I know other scans from other companies that charge direct to consumer, they are similarly priced, but you certainly don't get the similar type of service and follow-up, is what I understand.
Yeah, and look, the scans and the build out, it's not cheap. So scanners are very expensive.
You have your own MRI machines too. Is that right? So
the CoreViva
that's
MRI.
quite expensive.
Yeah, and so just kind of building our MRI, building our suite for the MRI. There's a lot that goes into it, right? I mean, just building a lot of people don't know this, but you have to kind of build a magnetic shield wall around the MRI machine because any kind of outside interference can mess up the images. And so these things are very expensive. Those walls are very thick with magnetic shielding. And so we were thinking of what's the right price point where obviously you don't want to lose money because then you can't serve patients. We're not losing money, but we're still able to help a lot of patients, and it's as accessible as we can make it. And that's kind of how we came up with it.
And is this something that you ever anticipate insurance of any kind to cover?
So what's interesting is a lot of physicians initially, when I talked to people before we started, poo-pooed this, right? And said, oh, they're going to find a lot of false positives. But that's where we're different. There's no false positive. What we see is what we see. And if we tell you it's malignant, it's malignant. It has been. If we tell you it's benign, it's benign. So we're very confident in our reports. And I think that's unique to us. But I think, moreover, if we keep continuing to prove this with, hey, we're finding these cancers early and we have a very low false positive rate. Like I said, right now it's 0. I'm sure there'll be something that slips through, but right now it's 0. Insurance companies, it's a business, right? And so they have to stay solvent, and they have to stay solvent by kind of adjusting risk along many lives. And so they don't want to pay for things that they don't think is going to help with that risk. But if we prove that, hey, all these patients that are early stage cancer, studies have shown us at least 5x more expensive to treat late stage cancer versus early stage cancer. And it's beyond that, musculoskeletal issues. It's at least much more expensive to have back surgery than to find things now and help you strengthen your back before it gets bad. Things like this. So I think once we have enough data to show that to the insurance companies, they'll say, hey, this is actually saving us money. And it's better to treat these patients early and find things early than when it's too late and it's going to be much more expensive. Once we prove that out, I do see a world where insurance starts covering this. But again, as you probably know, that process is long. You have to go through CMS, and that process is a long process. I think within 10 years this will get covered, but not tomorrow, unfortunately.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, the whole insurance problem is a headache for us all. Now that you've scanned however many folks, I know you've only been open for a couple months, but it sounds like you've been finding something in everyone and quite a number of cancers. Yeah. I'm curious, what sorts of cancers are coming up? And also anything surprising in terms of like a pattern, like something that's shown up way more often than you might have expected?
From the pattern standpoint, like I said before, every single person has a musculoskeletal problem. And one of the most common is the cervical spine. And I think it's because we're always like this now, looking at our phones.
Can you create a diagnosis, tech neck?
Well, I always joke that we went from Neanderthal man and then to Homo erectus, and now we're going back to Neanderthal man. I think we find that early and we say, hey, here's some exercise you can do. Here's some things you can do, better posture. For example, for me, even I have some tech neck. And so even me, I use a chair that has a back so I can kind of, as if I'm typing stuff, I can kind of do that. As I said, from 20 to 92, everybody has some musculoskeletal issues. So I didn't expect to find something in everybody.
And you can see, actually, I just realized, because you lie down for an MRI, you can see tech neck, like it's just
because you start seeing degenerative changes in the spine. Yep. You start seeing either disc bulge or dehydration of the disc or facet arthropathy or arthritis, so to speak. So yeah, you do see changes. So we found ovarian cancer, we found liver cancer, we found lung cancer very early.
So you can catch a lung cancer. Yeah, because, the classic teaching is that you'd want to do a CT for all that empty airspace, but you can see that well enough with the MRI?
As long as it's large enough. So the one we caught, I believe, was about 5 millimeters. So as long as it's large enough, we can see it. Actually, we've even seen 2 to 3 millimeter nodules on our. You were talking about MRI differences. So I'll give you a story. There was a patient that came in, had a scan, and we found that unfortunately, she had a brain tumor. Very early stages. And we kind of told her that if certain symptoms appear, you may want to go to the ER. And this was one of our early patients. Eventually symptoms appeared, went to the ER, and they kind of dismissed her. They didn't want to look at our scan. And they probably just thought we were kind of one of those corporate things and didn't realize that we're physician back, physician live. There's no corporation behind us. And so they kind of dismissed it. They did a scan of their own. Their scan, and this is an academic medical center, and their scans are thicker slices than ours, so they missed it. And then they kind of hedged it. Oh, we see something. It might be inflammation. This is a tumor, So her husband got in touch with me, and I said, 100% is a tumor. There's no question about it. Tell them, right? They still kind of refused. They went to another center. They kind of dismissed it and were calling it different diagnoses. They didn't look at our images. They only looked at the other academic medical center's images, and so they didn't show it that well. So they finally went to a neurosurgeon, and the neurosurgeon looked at our images and said, these are the best images I've seen. And where did you get them? And also said, 100% they're right. This is glioma. And when I heard that story, it made me feel proud, because we always say we have the best imaging, the best quality imaging. And a lot of physicians have said that. A lot of physicians that have, from feedback from patients, have said that our reports are the best they've seen in this space. So we're very proud of that. Again, we wanted to make a high quality experience, both what we do, but also the patient experience. And so we're very proud that we've achieved that. And we'll continue to. That's our goal.
That's an amazing story, because we all are grown up in this culture. And actually, a quick note on that, I've been to a million conferences this season, and a theme has been that there's this fear that culture is moving faster than science in longevity. And I actually think that might be true on the public front, the consumer front, but I actually think culture in terms of medical culture is so much slower, and to the point where we're defaulting to the old biases of an academic center knows best. But sometimes academic centers, they're a big company, corporation like any other, and it takes time to upgrade in terms of innovation. So 100%. I think that's a really interesting story for that reason. So,
and I think, again, a lot of them were poo-pooing this, and generally, sure, I agree too. And that's why Dr. Seuss said, I wouldn't send my family members to this. I agree, but I think you have to you can't have the shutters on and just think one way, right? You can't have a fixed mind. I always talk about fixed versus creative mindset. You can't have a
Right.
fixed mindset on everything. You got to say, okay, this is what I've seen, but now what's this? Has
Yeah.
somebody come out and done it better? Has somebody come out and done it right? And,
Hmm.
fortunately, we actually get a lot of physician referrals because I think the physicians in Southern California have seen what we're doing and love what we're doing, and they're sending the patients. But we take great care of the patients and we find things. Interestingly, some of the other players, they've had scans at other places. They come to us, we find things they missed. And they
Hmm.
always ask, well, how come they didn't catch this? I said, look, I'm not going to comment on other players, but we have the fastest, most accurate, most comprehensive scan. And, we use very thin slices and we do things and we figure out ways to do this fast. And that's the proprietary part. If you have it, we'll see. So, there's been a lot of interesting concern about the other players because I just don't think the quality's there.
Yeah. And it's tough, I know, because it is an expensive thing to scale. And to that point, I'm curious, imagine we're in 2035, 10 years from now.
Okay.
And what does success look like for CoreViva and for even how society approaches health and longevity?
I think we're starting to see a paradigm shift from reactive to proactive medicine. When I think back to like the 80s, you're sick, you go to the doctor, they tell you what to do it, you go home, or whatever treatment it may be. Now you see a lot of kind of, the wearables and these labs and all these other things. And I love it. It's really interesting that people are starting to take care of themselves and wanting to know more about themselves. Again, know your body, know more about themselves to help them live longer and better lives. And so by 2035, I think there will be a completion of that paradigm shift, I hope, from reactive to proactive, where everybody's proactive about their health, because that will help them live longer, better lives. Longevity is not just length of life, it's also quality of life. Again, let's plan for our 70s, 80s, 90s, and our 20s, 30s, and 40s. Let's make sure that we are healthy and do healthy things and be proactive so things don't catch up to us later in life. For CoreViva, success for me is defined as, and I've always said this, my goal is to save 10,000 lives. And, we have 9,989 to go. But, we've already found 11 early stage cancers. And I would argue even some of the early fatty liver disease or brain aneurysm we found will help people. So, if I can save 10,000 lives by 2035, I'm happy. I've done what I was meant to do in this life.
That's far more than most folks, even some physicians, I would say. So that would be amazing. I have a question about follow-up. So since MRI scans, whole body MRI scans are not a standard sort of screening methodology, how do you decide when a person should come back to get another MRI?
I'm adamant about getting one of these every year. I do it for myself. My wife's a physician. She does it herself. And the reason being is that some of these aggressive cancers, like pancreatic, ovarian, gliomas, brain cancers, they don't wait. It's not like a colonoscopy where you see everything with the camera really well and you're clean for 10 years. These cancers are fast. And so waiting a couple of years might be too late. And I'd want to know, let's catch it early. I want to live longer. I want to live healthier. And so I think every year is the right answer for this kind of, and I'm hoping that, as the paradigm shift occurs in 10 years in 2035, and hopefully insurance covers it, then this is just part of your physical exam every year. This is part of your yearly checkup. Because sure, we can examine the outside with stethoscope and listen and look, but you can't see the inside. We can tell if things are functioning well or look well, but we can't see the inside to see if there's anything actually there that could cause problems later.
I love that. And I agree that every year sounds about right. And the question that comes up is, it's going to be very rare, but some cancers do grow from nothing, essentially, to a sizable something, and even to a dangerous something if it's a very aggressive tumor in a shorter period of time than a year.
True.
So is that just something that we'll just have to accept because, people aren't going to be getting whole body MRIs every 3 months?
Well, the super aggressive ones that are very fast, you're going to have symptoms much faster. But unfortunately, you're going to have symptoms and it's a little bit later. So our goal is just to kind of hopefully catch it early, in that kind of, should you get one every 6 months or whatever? Good question. I mean, I think as we get more data and we can risk adjust and see if some people may be more predisposed to certain cancers, they should get it more frequently. And again, that's incentives for insurances and others. And I think over time, as we show that data, maybe that will be the new paradigm. 10 years from now, depending on who you are and what your risk factors are, you do it more frequently.
I wanted to ask you a few fun questions. What is the most overhyped thing in longevity right now? And part 2 of it is, what's criminally underrated?
So I think the most overhyped thing right now is all these advertisements I'm seeing for labs. In what world do you need 200 labs to tell you how healthy you are? And the one thing that irritates me is I start calling biomarkers. Since when has your sodium been a biomarker? Come on. There's about 15 labs that I get that I think are critical for me to understand my health every year. I don't need to know what my manganese is.
Yeah, right.
A lot of these labs, you're not going to do anything about it either if it's a little bit off. You're not going to do anything about it.
And how do you know that it's even a relevant range? That's something that I bring up a lot. We all have genetically predisposed variations,
Right.
and what might be normal for one person is not for another. So not fitting, the vast majority of the US populations, which is what a lot of these ranges are.
Yeah.
It could be sometimes even harder because, simply it's going to be different.
And you don't want to be over treated for something either, because that causes problems, right? For
Yeah.
example, let's say there's a lab it shows you might be a little bit low, but that's just who you are. And then they overcorrect it, and then you start having symptoms for, too much sodium or too much chloride or whatever it may be, right? And that can cause serious problems. It can cause brain damage. And there's a lot of things. So I'm hoping it's a fad, because
Right.
I think it causes more harm than good, and it causes more anxiety than good. I've had patients come and show me their labs, and I said, okay, not important, not important, not important, not important, not important. Ignore, 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 ignore. Okay, this is important, And I think I'm spending more time saying not important than important. I think there's about 15 labs that you need to get every year. It's slightly different for men and women, but I think the bulk of it's the same, and that will tell you, what we can do. And we've actually thought about doing this because it kind of annoys me that these people are coming out with these labs that don't make any sense, and they're getting anxiety about it. We may, stay tuned. We may do something to fix that, because CoreViva is not just a whole body MRI company. We're a health and wellness company. Try to help people be healthy and well, and we're talking about how we expand on that health and wellness, on a daily basis with our team. And so I think that's something that we may bring into the picture, if it makes sense.
I think everything in the longevity and general health space is essentially an initial wedge to the rest of care. Like, even as you were saying that, I was like, oh, imagine, going to a radiologist with your labs. That's not something we used to do. You mentioned it one time, AI. And which is funny because it always comes up and it takes like 90% of the airwaves. But, with the use of AI, we're starting to make specialist generalists and generalist specialists and so forth. And so I think it's no longer the traditional version of specialty-based medicine, and we're wedging with one thing, in your case, a whole body MRI, into the rest of holistic care. What is criminally underrated in the longevity space right now?
Being proactive with your health. Like I said, I'm seeing more of a trend, but it's still not anywhere where it needs to be. And I think being proactive with your health really helps a lot of people. Interestingly, I've seen more women book scans than men. And just knowing guy friends, I think men tend to ignore things, like I'll tough it out kind of thing. It is slight. It's not that big of a difference, but there is a difference. But I do also see a lot of women dragging their husbands in.
There's that age-old study saying that married men live longer, but married women don't necessarily. That is statistically true, apparently.
I love my wife, but good motivation to always stay married.
I think it comes from that. And my other random note is there was a recent analysis of something like 200 different species about which sex lived longer than the other. In most cases, it was the male, but the general pattern was it was the sex that had a lot of competitive pressures for mating. So in which case was the male in most cases, except for some kinds of birds, apparently. And it was theorized that it was due to expending so much energy and attention, brain space, focus on competition for mates rather than long-term survival. And so kind of the human male trying to tough it out kind of alludes to that sort of sentiment.
Interesting. Yeah, interesting. I mean, I feel like it goes back to you want to live for something, right? So you're motivated, you're kind of going towards something. You always need one purpose in life, right? Because folks, I feel like, lose that purpose, start aging faster, start not doing as well health-wise. So mental health is very important as well. And I think that's something we also overlook. And it's very interesting what we're seeing with the brain in a lot of people. I always say you have to work out your body and your brain. You have to kind of do all of it because it's all part of you. And the other thing that you mentioned around what's underrated, I think not just the preventative aspect, but also quality of care. And I think quality of care is underrated. And I think as physicians, unfortunately, get busier, I think there's not enough doctors in a lot of specialties, and there's a burden in the system. And so they're forced to see people much faster, squeeze in for appointments. It takes time. It's not the doctor's fault. It's just there's more patients. There's not as much doctors. There's a burden on the system. And so that quality is missing. And that's kind of where we come in, I feel like, to provide that quality care. And I think that's underrated. And that's missing. A lot of people, I think, crave it, but maybe they don't even know that it exists. And so I think quality care is really underrated.
I'm thinking about some of my colleagues who are still oncologists today, and they see 40 plus, like 60 patients even, because in a single clinic day, because they're double booked, triple booked.
Right.
Yeah. And you can't imagine like what that visit must be like for a cancer patient as well.
I want to make it clear to your listeners that it's not the doctor's fault. This is just the system. It's overburdened. The system is overburdened, and unfortunately, it is what it is. But don't blame the doctor.
So if someone listening wants to take one particular action today to extend their health span, what do you recommend that they do?
I'd say three things, not just one. It's going back to the basics. So number one, move. Don't sit in the same place for your whole day. If you're working at your desk, move. Get up every hour, move around, move. Work out, exercise. Movement is very important. Number two, we talked about a lot, sleep. So get your sleep. Resting your body is super important. The less sleep you get, the more oxidative damage occurs. Get that sleep, recuperate, regenerate. And number three would be your diet. Eat healthy. There's a lot of toxic stuff out there. There's a lot of processed food out there. Stay away from processed food. Try to keep it as clean as possible. If you don't understand an ingredient on something, don't buy it, because usually it's something weird or processed or preservative.
Or chances are it's a sugar by a different name.
That's true. That's actually great. That's actually a great point. Yeah, stay away from that stuff. It's not doing you any good. So I think, eating right, moving, and sleeping. Very, very basic stuff, but you just got to make it a habit.
And then we touch on this, but a lot of our clinician colleagues are so frustrated in the system and they want to do something to change the system. What would your advice be to other clinicians like this?
It's interesting because I think folks that are frustrated find the right solution that frustrates you, the right solution for what frustrates you. So I always tell folks on my team, don't come to me with a complaint, come to me with a solution. Sure, there's a lot of things we can complain about, but what's the solution? If you can come up with a solution, go do that, because you're not the only one that's going to appreciate that solution. A lot of people will. And find the solution and solve that problem. And don't be afraid to take risks. Don't be afraid to take risks. Life is more fun when you take risks.
That's the hardest thing. I know a lot of folks went into medicine because they didn't love taking personal risks.
Yeah, I mean, one of the you were talking about, one of the most frustrating things in the system is, especially for patients. I've had patients tell me this. It normally takes me 6 or 7 months to even get an MRI, get it approved, go see the right person. I have to see my primary care, then I have to see the specialist, and the specialist has to agree to doing this. First test, I get an X-ray, then they say, okay, well, now you get an MRI. And by that time, it's like 6 or 7 months. And sometimes my symptoms have passed, or sometimes it's got worse. One unfortunate story is that we had a patient who had some abdominal pain. They felt like it was bowel, it was digestive. And so had a colonoscopy done, it was negative. She wanted to get scanned, but they said your colonoscopy was negative. So that's that. Knew something was wrong, right? And you got to trust your instincts. As humans, we got to trust our instincts. Came in, got a scan. Unfortunately, it was ovarian cancer. And they didn't look there, right? They thought it was her colon. And so I think, but it's that whole going through those steps, and it takes so long in our current system. We're here to help people skip that step, and let's just find the answers to your problems. And some people that come in have some questions about symptoms. Some people come in or just want a clean bill of health, or want to see if there's anything hidden. Both are the right answer, right? Let's find the answers for you. And I think that's one of the frustrating things about the system is just, it's so overburdened, so busy. Folks don't really have time to listen anymore. Like you said, 60 patients a day. How much time do you have with each patient? The system has created something where the physicians are burdened. They can't spend the right time with the patients, and that's unfortunate. Part of that is because of declining reimbursements, right? So you have to kind of do something to make yourself solvent. Why is healthcare the only entity that has declining reimbursements? Everything else, prices go up, but we get declining reimbursements every year. I think that's crazy. We're trying to help take care of people, and then the system is making it tougher for us to do that. Obviously, we're cash paid, but part of that gives us the flexibility to sit down with the patient. I've sat down with patients for sometimes 2 hours. It just depends on who the patient is. And so, and sometimes it's been 30 minutes, but we have the luxury of doing that. I wish that the system was such that it would allow everybody to do that kind of thing, because patients deserve it. They deserve that time.
Before we wrap up, is there any last thing that you'd like to say for the audience?
I think we're moving in the right direction as a healthcare system, again, going from reactive to proactive. I think CoreViva can redefine the timeline of how we age. And that's really our goal, to really redefine that timeline of how you age. Again, it's not just about living long, but living a healthier and longer life. And hopefully people take control of their life and control their health and do that. Ultimately, like I say to everybody, know your body.
And where can people find more about you and CoreViva?
So CoreViva.com, CoreViva.com. We're on all social medias as CoreViva, except for Instagram, where we're core_Viva. I actually encourage people to look at our socials because they're fun. We've had a lot of celebrity patients come in. They're very interested in it. A lot of people are interested in this, but we've had a lot of regular people come in. But we do fun videos with some of these folks and put them on our socials. And so I encourage you guys to look at them.
I think people really underestimate the value of entertainment and fun in healthcare, because even though it's maybe not the substance of what you're providing, it's what keeps people engaged. And for what it's worth, we want to make healthcare a more enjoyable place to be. It shouldn't be just a place you have to interact with because, you don't want to die. It should be a place that you want to engage with and learn more.
Yeah, it is fun. It's fun to kind of know your body. It's fun to know what you can improve upon. A lot of people have a clean bill of health, but there's always something, right? And so especially kind of coming out knowing, okay, I'm cancer-free, but there's these things I can work on to even be better. I think that's really encouraging and really fun.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Alexander. I've learned a lot, and I'm sure our listeners are learning a lot with us. So appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks. My pleasure, Hillary. Always a pleasure talking to you too as well. And thank you for having a platform to let us spread the word.